Hey guys, tonight we're going to dim the lights. Maybe light a flickering candle safely, of course, and ease into a journey back in time all the way to ancient Egypt. Forget everything you think you know about dating apps, awkward first dates, and the dizzying array of types you swipe through. Because tonight you're not a modern human wrestling with commitment issues or trying to decipher emojis. Tonight you are an ancient Egyptian. And let me tell you, while some things never change, like the bewildering dance of attraction and the quest for companionship, dating in the land of the pharaohs was a whole different Nile to navigate. Imagine yourself strolling along the banks of the Nile, the warm sun baking the mud brick houses, the scent of baking bread and fragrant lotus blossoms heavy in the air. You might be a skilled artisan carefully carving a statue, or perhaps a humble farmer tending to your fields under the watchful gaze of the gods. Maybe you're a bustling merchant, haggling over prices in the marketplace, or even a serene priestess performing rituals in a grand temple. Whatever your station, the fundamental human desire for connection for a partner, to share life's burdens and joys, was just as strong for you as it is for us today. But here's the reality check, folks. You'd probably last about 5 minutes in ancient Egypt before something peculiar or downright dangerous got you. Forget your allergy to gluten. Try surviving a crocodile attack on your morning commute to the market. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. As you step into this ancient world, the first thing you'll notice is that the concept of dating, as we know it, a casual series of premarital encounters designed to find a romantic match, didn't really exist. Not in the way your mind immediately pictures it anyway. Marriage was the cornerstone of ancient Egyptian society, a fundamental building block for families and, by extension, for the entire social and economic structure. Your life, your status, and your legacy were inextricably linked to your marital status and your ability to produce heirs. So while romantic love certainly played a role, it often wasn't the primary driver for forming a union. Instead, practicality, family alliances, and the continuation of the family line frequently took precedence. It's not to say there wasn't passion or affection, quite the contrary, but the path to finding a partner was often more structured, less spontaneous than a modern-day Saturday night out. You wouldn't be swiping left or right on a papyrus scroll, that's for sure. For you, an ancient Egyptian, the journey to finding a partner often began within your own community, often with someone you already knew. Marriages between cousins or even half-siblings were not uncommon, especially within the royal family, to maintain the purity of the bloodline. But for the vast majority of you ordinary folk, the pool of eligible partners was usually drawn from your village, your social circle, or perhaps through business connections. You'd probably grow up knowing your future spouse, or at least their family. This wasn't necessarily a bad thing. It meant you had a built-in support system, a shared understanding of traditions, and often a similar family trade or livelihood. Imagine the ease of marrying someone who already understood the grueling rhythm of the agricultural calendar because their family also worked the land, or someone who could help manage your pottery workshop because they grew up in a similar artisan household. It sounds incredibly practical, doesn't it? A far cry from trying to explain your obscure hobby to someone you met online. The age at which you typically marry might surprise you. For women, marriage could occur quite young, often in their early to mid-teens, sometimes as young as 12 or 13, especially for girls from lower social strata. For men, it was usually a bit later, perhaps in their late teens or early 20s, after they had established themselves in a trade or could support a household. This early start to marital life meant that childhood, as we understand it, was often cut short. You would transition from playing with your siblings to taking on the responsibilities of a spouse, and soon after a parent, at an age when many modern individuals are still navigating high school. This early marriage age highlights the emphasis on procreation and the establishment of new family units as quickly as possible. The high infant mortality rates in ancient Egypt meant that having many children was crucial for ensuring the survival of some and the continuation of the family line. So, if you were a young woman in ancient Egypt, you likely wouldn't have much time to ponder your career aspirations or travel the world before settling down. Your career in many ways would become that of a wife and mother, a respected and vital role in society. Now let's talk about the wedding ceremony, or rather the lack thereof in the way we envision it. Unlike many modern cultures with elaborate rituals and legal paperwork, ancient Egyptian marriage was often more a social contract than a formal religious ceremony. There wasn't a specific wedding day or a priest officiating vows in a temple. Instead, the union was solidified by the simple act of the bride moving her possessions into the groom's home. Think of it as a very practical, almost understated affair. No extravagant white dresses, no towering cakes, no endless rounds of toast. It was a transition, a joining of households recognized by the community and solidified by the cohabitation of the couple. This doesn't mean it wasn't a joyous occasion, but the emphasis was on the practical implications of the union, rather than a grand public declaration of love. However, that's not to say love wasn't celebrated. Ancient Egyptian love poetry, often inscribed on papyri or ostraca pottery shards, speaks volumes about the deep affection and longing between partners. It's a sweet irony, isn't it? A society that formalized marriage with a simple move-in, yet penned some of the most beautiful and heartfelt declarations of love. While formal wedding ceremonies were rare, marriage contracts were surprisingly common and incredibly important. These weren't necessarily about who got the toaster in a divorce. They were more about protecting the financial interests of both parties, especially the wife. These contracts would detail the property each spouse brought into the marriage, any provisions for the wife if the marriage ended, and the support she would receive. This level of legal protection for women in marriage was remarkably progressive for its time. It meant that a woman wasn't entirely dependent on her husband's whims or goodwill. She had legal recourse and a degree of financial autonomy. It's a fascinating insight into their societal values where fairness and order were highly prized, even in the most intimate of relationships. So, if you were a woman in ancient Egypt, you might not have had a say in who you married, but you definitely had some say in the financial terms of that union. It was a practical safeguard in a world where personal security often hinged on one's economic standing. This often overlooked historical fact, the prevalence of these contracts, reveals a lot about the legal sophistication of ancient Egyptian society. Another intriguing aspect of ancient Egyptian relationships was the concept of monogamy versus polygamy. While monogamy was the general rule for most ordinary Egyptians, particularly due to economic constraints, it was simply too expensive to support multiple wives. Polygamy was permissible, especially for wealthy men, and of course the pharaohs. A pharaoh might have many wives and concubines, not just for pleasure, but for political alliances and to ensure a vast number of potential heirs. For you, the common person, having multiple wives would likely have been a sign of immense wealth and status. It was a luxury, not a norm. This brings us to a slightly humorous thought. Imagine having to explain to your first wife why you suddenly have a new addition to the household. The ancient Egyptians might have had more direct methods of communication, but I'm sure some of those conversations were still incredibly awkward. The role of women in ancient Egyptian society, particularly within the context of marriage and relationships, was surprisingly elevated compared to many other ancient civilizations. While men were generally the heads of households and held positions of power, women enjoyed significant legal and economic rights. They could own property, inherit land, initiate divorce, conduct business, and even represent themselves in court. This remarkable degree of autonomy meant that within a marriage, a woman wasn't simply a man's chattel. She was a partner with rights and responsibilities. This is a common historical fact often taught in introductory history classes, but its implications for daily life and relationships are profound. It suggests a more equitable partnership within marriage where both husband and wife had defined roles and recognized legal standing. The degree of equality between genders in ancient Egypt is a subject on which historians still debate the extent to which it translated into practical social power for women. But the legal framework certainly offered a strong foundation. The physical appearance and personal grooming rituals played a significant role in attracting a partner just as they do today. Ancient Egyptians were obsessed with cleanliness and aesthetics. You wouldn't just roll out of bed and hope for the best. Both men and women spent considerable time on their appearance using a variety of cosmetics, perfumes, and elaborate hairstyles. Kohl, for example, wasn't just for looking good. It also protected the eyes from the harsh sun and helped ward off infections. Perfumes made from fragrant oils and resins were used by both sexes to mask body odor and make themselves more alluring. Imagine the effort involved in preparing for an evening out or perhaps a visit to a potential suitor's house. You'd spend hours meticulously applying oils, dusting your skin with perfumed powders, and carefully arranging your wig. Speaking of wigs, they were a fashion statement and a sign of status worn by both men and women, often elaborately styled and adorned. So, if you were an ancient Egyptian trying to impress someone, you wouldn't just throw on your best linen tunic. You'd be a walking, talking work of art. One particular detail, though, might make you wince the use of crocodile dung as a form of contraception. Yes, you heard that right. While perhaps not widely adopted by everyone, some ancient Egyptian texts suggest this rather unconventional method was believed to be effective. The idea was that the alkalinity of the dung would act as a spermicide, or perhaps the sheer unpleasantness would deter well anything. It's certainly a unique and rather unsettling detail that highlights the lengths to which people would go for family planning, even if their scientific understanding was, shall we say, rudimentary. This obscure tidbit definitely falls into the things you probably didn't know about ancient Egypt category, and it certainly puts modern contraceptive methods into a very comfortable perspective. When it came to expressing affection and courtship, the ancient Egyptians weren't shy. Love letters, though not as common as in later periods, have been found often inscribed on ostraca. These weren't flowery, poetic declarations in the Shakespearean style, but rather straightforward, heartfelt messages of longing and desire. Imagine receiving a pottery shard with a simple message etched onto it: "My heart yearns for you." It's incredibly direct and touching in its simplicity. Gifts also played a crucial role in courtship. A man might offer a woman jewelry, fine linens, or even rare foods as a token of his affection and his ability to provide. These were not mere trinkets. They were tangible expressions of his devotion and his suitability as a partner. It was a practical society even in matters of the heart. The concept of love itself, while intertwined with practicality, was clearly present and celebrated. Egyptian love poetry paints vivid pictures of lovers meeting by the Nile, exchanging tender glances and yearning for each other's touch. It speaks of the beauty of the beloved, the joy of companionship, and the pain of separation. These poems aren't just historical artifacts, they are windows into the human heart, revealing emotions that are timeless and universal. You would find poems about a lover being compared to a beautiful garden, or the sound of their voice being sweeter than honey. It shows that even within a structured society, the raw emotional power of romantic love flourished. So, while your path to marriage might have been less about grand romantic gestures and more about family approval, the love within that marriage could be as deep and profound as any you'd find today. One crucial aspect of your romantic life, or lack thereof, in ancient Egypt was the significant role your family played in matchmaking. This wasn't a world where you simply bumped into someone at a party and decided to see where things go. Your parents, especially your father, would likely have had a strong hand in selecting your future spouse. This wasn't necessarily because they didn't trust your judgment, but because marriage was seen as an alliance, a way to strengthen family ties, secure economic stability, or even gain social standing. Imagine your parents having a meet the potential in-laws dinner, except instead of polite conversation, they're subtly assessing the other family's wealthland and connections. It sounds a bit like a business merger, doesn't it? But for you, the individual, it meant that your personal desires might often take a back seat to the larger family agenda. This isn't to say love was entirely absent from these arranged unions. Far from it. While the initial spark might not have been the driving force, affection, companionship, and a deep bond often grew within these marriages. Many love poems and tomb inscriptions speak of profound love between spouses, suggesting that while the beginning might have been practical, the journey often led to genuine devotion. Think of it as a slow burn rather than an explosive passion. You might start off with a sense of duty, but over time, as you shared the joys of raising children, the anxieties of a poor harvest, or the quiet comfort of an evening spent together, a deep and enduring love could blossom. This practical approach to marriage, where economic stability and social cohesion were prioritized, is a common historical fact across many ancient civilizations. Yet the ancient Egyptians seemed to cultivate genuine affection within these structures more openly than some others. Now let's talk about the domestic life once you were married. Your home, whether a humble mud brick dwelling or a grand estate, would have been the center of your world. Gender roles, while somewhat fluid, were generally well defined. As a man, you would be the primary provider working in the fields, practicing your craft, or serving in administration. As a woman, your primary role would be managing the household raising children, and often participating in various economic activities from home, such as weaving, baking, or brewing beer. It might sound restrictive, but these roles were highly valued and interdependent. A successful household required both partners to fulfill their duties efficiently. There was a clear division of labor, but also a shared responsibility for the family's well-being. It wasn't uncommon for women to run businesses or own property further, highlighting their agency within the family unit, which often surprises modern audiences. Consider the joys and challenges of raising a family in ancient Egypt. Children were seen as a blessing, a continuation of the family line, and a source of labor for the future. You'd likely have many children, not just out of desire, but also out of necessity given the high infant and child mortality rates. So imagine the constant worry, the tender care you'd give to each child, knowing that not all might survive to adulthood. Education, while informal for most, focused on teaching practical skills and moral values. Boys would learn their father's trade while girls would learn the domestic arts from their mothers. It was a hands-on apprenticeship-style upbringing, preparing children from a young age for their roles in society. The laughter of children echoing through your mud brick home, the simple games they played with carved wooden toys or clay figures, would have been a constant source of joy amidst the daily grind. One aspect that might surprise you is the relatively relaxed attitude towards divorce in ancient Egypt. Unlike some other ancient societies where divorce was difficult or only permissible for men, ancient Egyptians had a surprisingly straightforward process. Either husband or wife could initiate a divorce often for reasons such as infertility, neglect, or simply incompatibility. There was no social stigma attached to divorce, and women especially were protected by those aforementioned marriage contracts. If a divorce occurred, the contract would specify what property the wife would take with her, often including a portion of the family assets, ensuring she wasn't left destitute. This unique historical fact, the relative ease and fairness of divorce, speaks volumes about the pragmatic nature of Egyptian law and their respect for individual autonomy within relationships. Imagine the freedom this offered even in an ancient society, knowing that you weren't trapped in an unhappy union. Historians still debate the practical frequency of divorce among commoners, but the legal framework certainly existed. Beyond marriage, ancient Egyptian society also had a more open approach to sexuality than many later cultures. While procreation was a key purpose of marriage, intimacy and pleasure were also acknowledged and celebrated. Love spells designed to attract a desired partner reveal a frankness about sexual desire. Erotic art, found in various forms, depicts a society comfortable with the human body and its pleasures. This wasn't a puritanical society where sexual expression was suppressed. Instead, it was viewed as a natural and joyful part of human experience, within the confines of established social norms, of course. You wouldn't find explicit public displays, but in private there was a clear understanding and acceptance of physical intimacy as a vital component of a relationship. It's an intriguing contrast to many of the moral codes that would emerge in later eras. Consider the role of music, dance, and banquets in social interactions, and by extension in the ancient Egyptian dating scene. While dating as a casual pursuit was rare, social gatherings were crucial for meeting potential partners and strengthening community bonds. Imagine attending a festive banquet hosted by a wealthy noble or a local celebration in your village. You'd see men and women mingling, enjoying food, wine, and entertainment. Musicians would play harps, flutes, and lutes, while dancers would gracefully move to the rhythm. These were opportunities for subtle flirtation, for exchanging glances across a crowded room, or for engaging in polite conversation. It was a much more organic and community-driven way of meeting people than today's isolated digital interactions. You wouldn't be scrolling through profiles, you'd be observing personalities' gestures and the way someone interacted with their family and friends. A small, understated gesture like a shared laugh over a silly joke or a lingering gaze could be the beginning of something significant. Even in a society where marriages were often arranged, there was still room for individual preference and attraction to play a role. While parents might propose a match, it wasn't always a forced union. There was often an element of consent or at least acceptance from the individuals involved. Imagine a scenario where your parents introduce you to a potential spouse, and while they might deem them suitable, you find yourself genuinely drawn to their wit, their kindness, or their quiet strength. That personal connection, that spark, was still a powerful force. This nuanced interplay between family expectations and individual desire is a subtle but important aspect of understanding ancient Egyptian relationships. It wasn't all cold calculation, the human heart still had its say. Now, let's think about the practicalities of setting up a new household. Once you were married, establishing your own home was a significant undertaking. For a young couple, this might involve moving into a smaller dwelling near the husband's family, or if resources allowed, building a new house. Furnishing it would be a gradual process, starting with essentials like mats, for sleeping pottery, for cooking and storage, and perhaps a simple wooden chest for your belongings. Over time, as your wealth grew, you might acquire more elaborate furniture, decorative items, and even a garden. The act of building a home together, of gradually accumulating possessions, and creating a shared space would have been a powerful bonding experience. It was a constant reminder of your partnership, your shared future, and the fruits of your combined labor. Finally, consider the concept of love spells and charms. While we often think of ancient Egyptians as highly rational and organized, they also embraced a strong belief in magic and divine intervention. If you were struggling to attract a partner or perhaps wanted to ensure the fidelity of your spouse, you might consult a local magician or priestess for a love spell. These spells, inscribed on papyrus or small amulets, would invoke various deities or spirits to influence the affections of another. Some might involve burning incense, chanting incantations, or carrying specific charms. It's a fascinating glimpse into the more mystical side of ancient Egyptian romance, showcasing their belief that even matters of the heart could be influenced by supernatural forces. A rather amusing thought, perhaps, for those of us who just send a text, but a serious endeavor for them. This particular detail, the use of love spells, is an obscure historical fact that highlights the blend of practicality and superstition in their daily lives. Imagine waking up in your mud brick home, the early morning light filtering through a small window. Your first order of business wouldn't be scrolling through social media, but rather an elaborate ritual of personal grooming. Both men and women in ancient Egypt were meticulously clean and paid immense attention to their appearance. This wasn't just about vanity, it was deeply intertwined with health, social status, and even spiritual purity. You wouldn't step out of your house without having thoroughly washed yourself, likely with natron, a natural salt, and oils to cleanse your skin and ward off body odor in the hot climate. This dedication to hygiene is a common historical fact, often overlooked when focusing on their monuments. One of the most striking aspects of ancient Egyptian beauty was their use of cosmetics. Forget your modern makeup bags. Theirs were filled with pigments and tools that would astonish you. Both men and women applied kohl, a dark paste made from galena, a lead ore, to their eyes. This wasn't just for dramatic effect, it served a practical purpose too. The kohl helped protect their eyes from the harsh glare of the sun, and surprisingly had antiseptic properties that could ward off eye infections, a common ailment in a dusty, sandy environment. Imagine the painstaking effort you'd put into perfecting that iconic, almond-shaped eye, a look that has transcended millennia and still influences fashion today. It was a skill and art form and a necessity. Beyond kohl, the ancient Egyptians used a variety of other makeup. Green malachite was often used for eyeshadow, giving a striking, almost otherworldly appearance. Red ochre was mixed with oil or fat to create a lip and cheek stain, providing a rosy glow. They even had primitive forms of foundation powders made from ground minerals that would lighten the complexion, a sign of nobility and a contrast to the sun-darkened skin of laborers. Think about the careful mixing of pigments, the delicate application with small brushes or even your fingers. This wasn't a quick swipe. It was a ritual, a transformation designed to enhance your features and present the best possible version of yourself. Hair care was equally important. Natural hair was often short or shaved to prevent lice and keep cool, especially for the lower classes. But for those with means, Wigs were all the rage. These weren't just simple hairpieces. They were elaborate, intricately styled creations made from human hair plant fibers or even sheep's wool. Imagine the sensation of wearing a heavy braided wig adorned with gold rings or perfumed cones that would slowly melt, releasing fragrant oils throughout the day. Wigs were a sign of wealth status and cleanliness, allowing for elaborate styles that natural hair couldn't achieve. You would have a dedicated servant if you were wealthy enough to meticulously care for and style your wig, ensuring you always looked impeccable. This dedication to wigs is a fascinating and often amusing detail of ancient Egyptian fashion, showcasing their elaborate sense of style. And speaking of fragrance, perfumes and scented oils were indispensable. The ancient Egyptians didn't just smell clean, they smelled exquisite. They used a process called enfleurage to extract scents from flowers like lotus lily and jasmine, mixing them with oils and fats to create solid perfumes or fragrant unguents. These would be stored in beautiful alabaster or glass vessels and applied generously to the body hair and even clothing. The goal was to constantly exude a pleasant aroma, a stark contrast to the less fragrant realities of ancient life. Imagine the delicate, earthy scent of frankincense and myrrh mingling with floral notes as you walk through the marketplace, a subtle yet powerful statement of your status and allure. Now let's address the more extreme and frankly a bit gross side of their beauty regimen. While their general practices were sophisticated, some texts suggest rather peculiar remedies. For example, some historical sources indicate the use of crocodile dung as a facial mask for its supposed beautifying properties, or even as mentioned before as a contraceptive. While the efficacy is highly questionable by modern standards, and it certainly falls into the category of things you probably wouldn't try at home, it highlights the lengths to which people would go in their pursuit of beauty and fertility. It's a rather obscure historical fact, often causing a chuckle, but it truly demonstrates a different understanding of science and medicine. Beyond cosmetics and perfumes, the ancient Egyptians also invested heavily in skincare. The harsh desert sun and dry climate meant that moisturizers and sun protection were essential. They used oils like moringa castor and olive oil to keep their skin supple and prevent dryness. Aloe vera was also prized for its soothing and healing properties. While they didn't have SPF numbers, their liberal use of oils and sometimes even thicker paste-like applications would have provided some barrier against the sun's damaging rays. Imagine diligently applying a rich oil after your daily wash, ensuring your skin remained soft and youthful. A stark contrast to the cracked and weathered skin of those who toiled unprotected in the sun. This emphasis on skin health, not just appearance, shows a holistic approach to self-care. Dental hygiene was another area of focus, though perhaps less glamorous. The ancient Egyptian diet, heavy in bread often ground with sand and grit, meant that dental problems were rampant. They suffered from severe tooth-wear abscesses and cavities. To combat this, they practiced early forms of dental hygiene using chewing sticks and abrasive paste made from ingredients like salt mint and dried iris. While not as effective as modern dentistry, it shows a conscious effort to maintain oral health, not just for comfort, but also for social presentation. Imagine the discomfort of a constant toothache and the effort you'd put into any available remedy to alleviate it, not to mention the social awkwardness of bad breath. Historians still debate the true effectiveness of their dental practices, but the sheer number of dental problems found in mummified remains suggests it was a losing battle for many. The overall impression you would aim to create as an ancient Egyptian was one of radiance and vitality. This wasn't just about attracting a partner, it was about projecting an image of well-being, prosperity, and favor from the gods. A healthy, well-groomed appearance was believed to reflect inner purity and a harmonious relationship with the divine. So when you presented yourself in society, whether at a feast, a market, or a temple, you were not just showcasing your physical attributes, but also your adherence to cultural values and your general good fortune. This holistic view of beauty encompassing physical, social, and spiritual dimensions makes their grooming rituals far more profound than mere vanity. Think about the time and resources invested in this self-care. For the wealthy, this meant dedicated servants access to rare and expensive ingredients and leisure time to indulge in long bathing and grooming sessions. For the common person, it would still involve a daily commitment to cleanliness, using more readily available materials. But the underlying desire to present a respectable and attractive appearance remains strong. It's a testament to the universal human desire to feel good about oneself and to make a positive impression on others, a sentiment that transcends millennia. Finally, consider the legacy of ancient Egyptian beauty. From Cleopatra's legendary allure to the striking images of Nefertiti, their beauty standards continue to fascinate and inspire. The kohl-rimmed eyes, the elaborate wigs, the smooth, oiled skin. These are images that have become synonymous with ancient Egypt. They weren't just creating a look for their time. They were setting trends that would echo through history. And for you, an ancient Egyptian, this meticulous attention to detail wasn't just a daily chore. It was an integral part of your identity, your social interaction, and your journey through life, including the fascinating, often elaborate dance of finding a partner. Imagine yourself at a bustling market, the air thick with the scent of spices, freshly baked bread, and the murmur of countless voices. Your eyes might meet across a stall piled high with vibrant textiles, or perhaps as you both reach for the same piece of gleaming pottery. This wasn't a world of casual hellos to strangers. Interactions were more deliberate, often initiated through a shared social circle or a public gathering. For you, in ancient Egyptian direct approaches were less common, especially for women. Instead, a subtle glance, a prolonged eye contact, or a shared smile might be the first spark, an unspoken invitation for further interaction. It was a more nuanced dance of attraction, relying heavily on nonverbal cues and the unspoken language of desire. Once that initial spark was kindled, the exchange of gifts became a crucial part of the courtship ritual. This wasn't just about showing off your wealth. It was a demonstration of your affection, your generosity, and your ability to provide for a family. For a man offering a woman a piece of exquisite jewelry, perhaps a necklace of faience beads, a delicate bracelet, or even a carved amulet, was a powerful statement. These gifts were not only beautiful but often carried symbolic meaning, representing protection, fertility, or love. Imagine receiving a finely crafted scarab beetle amulet, a symbol of rebirth and good fortune, from someone you admired. It spoke volumes without a single word. For a woman, a thoughtful gift might be a basket of freshly picked fruits, a finely woven linen cloth, or even a small, beautifully decorated pottery vessel. These practical yet personal offerings showcased her domestic skills and her attentiveness. This practice of gift-giving as a form of courtship is a common historical fact across many cultures, but its specific symbolism in Egypt makes it unique. Beyond material gifts, love, poetry, and songs were perhaps the most eloquent expressions of affection. The ancient Egyptians were surprisingly romantic, and their literary heritage includes numerous beautiful love poems. These weren't necessarily written by the lovers themselves, but rather recited or commissioned, showcasing the depth of their emotions. Imagine listening to a skilled harpist perform a love song, its verses speaking of the beloved's beauty, comparing them to a lush garden or a fragrant lotus flower. You might hear lines like, "My heart has hastened to return to you, my darling, when I see your beauty." These poetic declarations, often quite sensual and direct, allowed for a public yet artistic expression of private feelings. It's a testament to their appreciation for beauty and their comfort with expressing desire openly through art. Historians still debate the extent to which these poems reflected actual lived experiences versus idealized romantic notions, but their existence undeniably speaks to a culture that valued emotional expression. Another subtle form of courtship involved shared activities and social gatherings. You might find yourself invited to a banquet hosted by a mutual friend or a family member. These feasts were elaborate affairs with abundant food, wine, music, and dancers. It was an opportunity to observe your potential partner in a relaxed setting, to see how they interacted with others, how they carried themselves, and whether their laughter was genuine. Imagine the subtle flirtation that could occur across a table laden with roasted duck and fresh bread, perhaps a shared glance, a whispered comment, or a playful jest. These social events provided a sanctioned space for men and women to mingle, and for nascent attractions to develop under the watchful yet often approving eyes of the community. It was a far cry from a private dinner date, but no less effective in its own way. The art of verbal compliment was also refined. While direct compliments might be considered too forward in some contexts, flattering verses or comparisons to deities were acceptable and admired. A man might praise a woman's face like the moon, or her hair like the finest obsidian. A woman might admire a man's strength, his wisdom, or his skill in his craft. These compliments were often delivered with a poetic flourish reflecting the Egyptians' love for beautiful language. It wasn't just about saying someone looked good, it was about elevating their qualities to a divine or natural ideal. Think about the careful choice of words, the subtle hint of admiration in your voice, designed to convey your interest without being overtly aggressive. For a woman, expressing interest often involved a more nuanced approach. While men might be more direct in their overtures, a woman might signal her availability or interest through her demeanor, her dress, or by subtly positioning herself where a desired man might notice her. Perhaps she would wear a particularly striking piece of jewelry or arrange her wig in an especially alluring style. She might also engage in playful banter, demonstrating her wit and intelligence. These were subtle invitations allowing the man to make the next move while maintaining her social decorum. It was a delicate balance, an intricate dance of unspoken signals and calculated moves, much like today's dating scene, but without the benefit of knowing what someone means when they send a single emoji. Sometimes for those feeling particularly bold or desperate, there was also the option of love spells and amulets. We touched upon this briefly, but it's worth exploring further in the context of courtship. If your conventional attempts at attracting a partner weren't yielding results, or if you desired to secure the affection of someone who seemed uninterested, you might resort to magical intervention. Imagine consulting a local magician or a wise woman who would provide you with an inscribed papyrus or a specially prepared amulet. These spells often involved invoking deities like Hathor, the goddess of love, or Bez, the protector of households, to influence the target's emotions. You might be instructed to recite incantations, burn specific herbs, or even carry a charm hidden on your person. While we might view this as superstition for the ancient Egyptians, it was a legitimate, albeit unconventional tool in the romantic arsenal. This rather obscure historical fact shows the blend of the practical and the mystical in their approach to love. Consider a funny moment in this ancient courtship dance. Imagine a young man desperate to impress a woman, perhaps overdoing it with the scented oils or trying to recite a love poem he's clearly memorized, poorly stumbling over the words and blushing furiously. Or a woman trying to be subtle with her flirtation, accidentally knocking over a pile of linen at the market, creating a clumsy yet potentially endearing moment. These small human foibles would have existed then, just as they do now, adding a touch of awkward charm to the otherwise structured rituals. The role of family approval cannot be overstated in the progression of any serious courtship. While individual attraction might be the spark, the flame could only truly burn brightly with the blessing of both families. Once a man expressed serious interest and was seen as a suitable match, formal discussions would begin between the parents. This wasn't a secretive affair. It was an open negotiation about the terms of the marriage, including the aforementioned marriage contract's dowry, though less common than in some other societies and property agreements. This process could be lengthy, involving multiple visits and intricate discussions to ensure both families were satisfied with the alliance. It was a reminder that even in matters of the heart, the wider social and economic implications were paramount. Ultimately, the goal of courtship in ancient Egypt was not just about finding a romantic partner, but about establishing a stable and prosperous family unit. Every step from the subtle glances to the exchange of gifts and the formal family negotiations was geared towards this ultimate objective. It was a journey from individual attraction to communal recognition, culminating in a partnership designed to endure, to produce heirs, and to contribute to the fabric of society. For you, an ancient Egyptian navigating this world of courtship required a blend of personal charm, strategic gift-giving, and a keen understanding of social etiquette, all under the guiding hand of family expectations. It was a complex, beautiful, and ultimately very human process, played out against the timeless backdrop of the Nile and the towering pyramids. Imagine your family's daily life revolving around the rhythms of the Nile and the demands of your trade or profession. Every member played a crucial role, and the stability of the household was paramount. For you, an ancient Egyptian selecting a spouse wasn't just a personal choice. It was a collective family decision. Your parents, particularly your father, held significant sway. They weren't being controlling. They were acting within a deeply ingrained cultural framework where marriage was an alliance, a means to preserve property, strengthen economic ties, and maintain social status. Think of it as a strategic chess move on the grand board of life, where each family tried to secure the best possible future for its lineage. This parental involvement often meant that arranged marriages were common. You might be introduced to a potential spouse from a family known to yours, perhaps a distant cousin, or the child of a trusted business associate. These introductions weren't necessarily romantic at first glance. Instead, they were practical assessments. Your parents would consider the other family's wealth, reputation, and connections. They'd look at the potential spouse's character, their skills, and their ability to contribute to your household. It sounds less like a whirlwind romance and more like a carefully vetted partnership, doesn't it? But remember, in this society, security and stability often trumped fleeting passion. However, arranged didn't always mean forced. While parents initiated discussions and might have a strong preference, there was often an element of consent or at least acceptance from the individuals involved. You, as a prospective spouse, would likely have the opportunity to meet and observe your intended. While outright refusal might be difficult, a strong aversion could potentially lead to a different match being sought. This is a nuanced point. While familial pressure was immense, personal discomfort wasn't always ignored. The ancient Egyptians valued harmony, and a deeply unhappy union wouldn't benefit anyone in the long run. The social norms surrounding marriage were incredibly strong. Remaining unmarried, especially for a woman, was highly unusual and often undesirable. Marriage was the expected path to fulfillment of your societal role. For a woman, it was about becoming a wife and a mother, continuing the family line. For a man, it was about establishing his own household and demonstrating his ability to provide. These expectations shaped every aspect of your life, from your upbringing to your daily interactions. Imagine the subtle or not so subtle pressure from your relatives and neighbors if you hadn't found a suitable partner by a certain age. It was a communal expectation, not just a personal one. Within these unions, the concept of polygamy also played a role, though primarily for the elite. While most commoners practiced monogamy, largely due to economic constraints, wealthy men and pharaohs could have multiple wives and concubines. This wasn't necessarily about romantic love for each partner, but more about political alliances, securing heirs, and demonstrating immense wealth and power. Imagine the complexities of managing such a household with different wives, vying for attention and status, and the pharaoh trying to maintain order. It's a fascinating glimpse into the privileges and challenges of the ancient Egyptian aristocracy, where even relationships were a tool of statecraft. The role of children within the family structure was also paramount and directly influenced marital choices. Children were seen as a blessing, a gift from the gods, and absolutely essential for the continuation of the family line and the provision of support in old age. High infant mortality rates meant that having many children was a practical necessity to ensure some would survive to adulthood. Therefore, the fertility of a potential spouse was a significant consideration, especially for a woman. Imagine the pressure to produce offspring. The anxieties of conception was difficult, and the joy when a new life was brought into the world. It was a deeply ingrained societal value shaping not only who you married, but also the purpose of your union. Education, while informal for most, also reinforced these social norms. Boys were trained in their father's trade or prepared for administrative roles, learning skills essential for providing for a family. Girls were taught domestic management, weaving, cooking, and child-rearing, all skills crucial for running a successful household and attracting a good husband. You would learn from a young age that your future lay in establishing a family, contributing to its prosperity, and upholding its reputation within the community. This common historical fact about gendered education underscores how deeply embedded these marital expectations were from childhood. Consider the humorous aspect of family interference. Imagine your overly enthusiastic aunties constantly pointing out eligible bachelors or maidens at every village gathering, subtly or not so subtly trying to steer you towards a good match. Or perhaps your father puffing out his chest, boasting about your accomplishments to a potential father-in-law, even if some of them were slightly exaggerated. These human elements, the familial nudges and proud declarations, would have added a layer of comedic charm to the otherwise serious business of matchmaking. The legal framework surrounding marriage and family also reinforced social norms. As discussed, marriage contracts protected the rights and property of both spouses, especially women. This legal protection meant that a woman wasn't entirely dependent on her husband's benevolence. She had legal standing within the marriage and in the event of a divorce. This surprising degree of legal autonomy for women within marriage, where they could own property, initiate divorce, and manage their own affairs, is an obscure historical fact that often challenges modern preconceptions about ancient societies. It suggests a more equitable balance of power within the domestic sphere than might be immediately apparent. Historians still debate the practical application of these rights across all social strata, but the existence of such laws points to a progressive legal system. Ultimately, for you, an ancient Egyptian marriage was far more than just a romantic partnership. It was a cornerstone of your existence, deeply interwoven with your family's identity, your social standing, and your economic security. The choice of a spouse was a careful balance between personal attraction, familial expectations, and the overarching social norms that prioritized continuity and stability. It was a system that, while perhaps lacking the passionate spontaneity of modern romance, offered a profound sense of belonging, purpose, and enduring connection within the comforting embrace of your community. Imagine for a moment that your carefully constructed ancient Egyptian marriage, perhaps one arranged with the best intentions, begins to fray. Perhaps the initial affection has faded, or the practical benefits are no longer being met. Unlike some later, more rigid societies, ancient Egypt offered a surprising degree of flexibility when a union simply wasn't working. This wasn't a land where you were trapped in a miserable marriage until death did you part, not necessarily. Let's first consider adultery. While certainly frowned upon and considered a breach of trust, the consequences of adultery in ancient Egypt were not always as brutal as in some other cultures. For men, adultery was generally tolerated, especially for those of higher status, though it could lead to social disapproval. For women, however, the stakes were higher. A woman's adultery was viewed more seriously as it could cast doubt on the paternity of children, which was crucial for inheritance and family lineage. While extreme punishments like death were theoretically possible, they were rare and often reserved for specific contexts or for repeated egregious offenses. More commonly, a woman caught in adultery might face public shaming, divorce, or loss of property rights. This double standard, while frustratingly familiar even today, highlights the societal emphasis on male lineage and control over female sexuality. It's a common historical fact that reflects gender inequalities across many ancient societies, though the specific nuances vary. Now onto divorce, which, as briefly mentioned before, was remarkably accessible for both men and women. This is a truly fascinating aspect of ancient Egyptian law. Either spouse could initiate a divorce, and the reasons were quite broad: infertility, neglect, abandonment, or simply incompatibility. You didn't need to prove fault or engage in lengthy legal battles, at least not always. The process was often as simple as the declaration of intent by one party and the acceptance by the other, followed by the dissolution of the marriage contract. Imagine the sense of liberation this might offer, knowing that if your marriage became truly unbearable, there was a legitimate path to end it without severe social ostracism. The key to this relatively smooth divorce process lay in those meticulous marriage contracts we discussed earlier. These contracts weren't just about initiating a marriage, they were also about its potential dissolution. They would specify the financial arrangements in case of divorce, outlining how property would be divided and what support the wife would receive. For a divorced woman, this meant she wasn't left destitute. She would often retain her dowry, if any, a share of the community property acquired during the marriage, and sometimes even a portion of her ex-husband's income for support. This legal protection for women in divorce was incredibly progressive for the ancient world and underscores their pragmatic approach to family law. It's an obscure historical fact that challenges the typical narrative of women's oppression in ancient times. Historians still debate how consistently these protections were enforced for all social classes, but their legal existence is undeniable. This ease of divorce meant that second chances were a very real possibility. If your first marriage didn't work out, you were absolutely free to remarry. There was no social stigma attached to being divorced, and individuals, both men and women, often remarried multiple times throughout their lives. This reflects a society that prioritized stability and partnership, recognizing that not every initial match would be successful. Imagine the relief of finding a more compatible partner after an unhappy first marriage, the hope of building a better, stronger family unit. It speaks to a culture that valued personal well-being and the continuation of family life above strict adherence to an initial potentially flawed union. Consider a lighthearted scenario. Perhaps a woman divorces her incredibly boring husband, who only ever talks about the perfect irrigation channels, and then finds true love with a charming scribe who recites love poems to her. Or a man whose first wife's culinary skills were questionable at best finds happiness with a woman renowned for her delicious beer making. These mundane yet humorous details would have been part of the everyday tapestry of ancient Egyptian life, showing the resilience and adaptability of people navigating their relationships. While the legal process of divorce was relatively straightforward, the emotional fallout was, of course, just as real then as it is now. The heartache, the disappointment, the disruption to family life. These human emotions would have been keenly felt. Children, if any, would have to adjust to new living arrangements, often staying with the mother or being cared for within her family's network. While the legal framework was progressive, the personal transitions could still be challenging. This human element reminds us that despite the vast differences in culture and time, the core experiences of love loss and new beginnings remain remarkably constant. The concept of family continuity was still paramount, even in the context of divorce. While a marriage might end, the focus would quickly shift to ensuring both parties, especially the woman, could find new partners and continue to contribute to society by establishing new families and producing heirs. This societal emphasis on procreation meant that being divorced wasn't a dead end for your social or personal life. It was merely a temporary pause before the next chapter. It's a pragmatic approach that prioritized the larger societal good, the continuation of the populace, over individual romantic ideals. Finally, the unique attitudes towards sexuality also played into this flexibility regarding marriage and divorce. As discussed, ancient Egyptians had a relatively open view of sexuality as a natural part of life. While adultery was not condoned, the legal and social mechanisms for dealing with marital breakdown were designed to be functional rather than purely punitive. This practical mindset extended to their understanding of human nature, acknowledging that relationships could fail and that individuals deserve the opportunity to find happiness and fulfill their societal roles anew. It was a refreshing contrast to societies that would later impose much stricter moral codes and make divorce a near impossibility, often trapping individuals in unhappy, unfulfilling lives. Imagine a quiet evening, perhaps after a long day working in the fields or crafting intricate jewelry. You sit by the soft glow of an oil lamp, and instead of a modern novel, you pick up a papyrus scroll or a simple ostracon, a pottery shard inscribed with verses of love. The ancient Egyptians, despite their pragmatic approach to marriage, were prolific and passionate poets when it came to matters of the heart. Their love poetry is a window into their innermost feelings, revealing a tenderness, longing, and joy that resonates across millennia. These love poems weren't just abstract musings, they were vibrant sensory experiences. They often described the beloved in vivid detail, comparing them to the beauty of nature that surrounded them. Imagine a lover described as a gazelle on the desert hills, or a woman whose limbs are like branches of papyrus. The Nile, with its lush banks and fragrant lotus blossoms, often served as a romantic backdrop. You might read lines like, "I am your first sister, and you are to me as a garden of dates," or "My love is unique, no other like her." These were not mere compliments. They were deep declarations of admiration and devotion, elevating the beloved to an almost divine status. The themes in this poetry are incredibly relatable. There's the longing for the beloved's presence. "My heart hastens to return to you, my darling, when I see your beauty." There's the pain of separation. "My limbs are weak, my heart is not in its place. My legs cannot carry me, for my beloved is far away." And there's the pure joy of companionship. My heart delights in your love, my limbs are renewed when you come to me. These emotions expressed with such clarity and beauty remind you that the human heart, regardless of the era, yearns for connection and intimacy. One fascinating aspect of these poems is their frankness about desire and sensuality. While PG-13 for our purposes, the original texts often contained clear allusions to physical intimacy, reflecting a society that was comfortable with the body and its pleasures. The poetry speaks of kissing, embracing, and the delight of physical closeness. This isn't just about procreation, it's about mutual pleasure and the joy found in the beloved's touch. It's a striking contrast to some later cultures that would suppress or demonize physical desire. For the ancient Egyptians, love encompassed both the emotional and the physical, a holistic view of human connection. Consider the humorous side of some of these declarations. Imagine a young man so smitten he likens his beloved to a bundle of fresh flax, a rather practical yet perhaps endearing compliment to an agricultural society. Or a woman complaining poetically, of course, that her lover's absence makes even the freshest bread taste like straw. These small everyday details woven into the fabric of the poems add a touch of relatable humor to the grand declarations of love. The setting of these poems often placed lovers in natural, idyllic landscapes. You'd find them by the river amidst papyrus reeds or in gardens filled with fragrant flowers and fruit trees. These settings weren't just decorative. They emphasized the natural, pure, and often secret nature of their affections away from the bustling public eye. Imagine a clandestine meeting under the shade of a sycamore tree, the air filled with the scent of jasmine, as whispered words of love are exchanged. This romantic imagery is a common historical fact, found in love poetry worldwide, but the specific Egyptian flora and fauna make it uniquely theirs. The structure of these poems could vary. Some were short, poignant verses almost like modern haikus. Others were longer narratives telling a story of pursuit and longing. They often used repetition and parallelism, creating a rhythmic, almost hypnotic quality that would be perfect for a bedtime story, easing you into a world of ancient romance. Imagine the soothing cadence of the verses designed to lull you into a state of blissful contemplation about love. While these poems were likely enjoyed by both the literate elite and the common people who might have heard them recited, they also served a social function. They provided a vocabulary for expressing love, a template for romantic sentiment. If you wanted to impress someone or simply articulate your feelings, these poems offered a rich lexicon of emotional expression. They show that even in a society often perceived as rigid and focused on death and the afterlife, there was a profound appreciation for life's joys, especially the joy of human connection. This balance between the practical and the poetic is a fascinating contradiction in ancient Egyptian culture. The existence of such a rich body of love poetry also provides an important counterpoint to the often discussed arranged marriages. While initial unions might have been practical, these poems demonstrate that deep, passionate love could and did blossom within these marriages. They show that individuals still sought and cherished romantic connection, even if the path to finding it was different from our own. It's an obscure historical fact that highlights the emotional depth of a civilization, often simplified by its monumental architecture. Historians still debate the extent to which these poems were genuinely reflective of everyday romantic relationships versus being more idealized literary creations for entertainment, but their very existence undeniably points to a culture that understood and celebrated love. Ultimately, these love poems are a powerful reminder of the timeless nature of human emotion. They speak across thousands of years, telling you that the yearning for a beloved, the joy of shared intimacy, and the beauty of a cherished partner are universal experiences. As you drift off to sleep, let the gentle whispers of these ancient verses fill your mind, reminding you that even in a world of pharaohs and pyramids, the human heart beat with the same desires for love and connection that you feel today. Imagine a society where the human body wasn't shrouded in shame or moralistic judgment, but was instead celebrated as a vessel for life, pleasure, and connection. This was to a surprising extent the mindset of ancient Egyptians. Their approach to sexuality and sensuality was remarkably open and uninhibited, especially when compared to many later civilizations. This isn't to say it was a free-for-all. There were social norms and expectations, but within those boundaries, pleasure and intimacy were acknowledged as natural and enjoyable aspects of human existence. This openness is evident in various forms of their art and literature. While you won't find explicit pornography in public spaces like on temple walls, that would be truly scandalous. Erotic art and imagery certainly existed. These often appeared on ostraca pottery shards, papyri, or small private figurines, depicting couples in intimate embraces or engaging in sexual acts. These weren't necessarily for public display, but for private enjoyment, suggesting a comfort with and appreciation for the physical side of relationships. Imagine coming across a small, beautifully painted pottery shard in your home, depicting a tender moment of intimacy. It would be a personal piece, perhaps shared only with your closest confidants. The love poetry we explored earlier also speaks volumes about their comfort with sensuality. As you might recall, many poems openly express desires for physical closeness, comparing the beloved's body to desirable objects or natural beauty. Lines describing the joy of a kiss and embrace or simply being near the beloved's physical presence were common. This wasn't merely veiled language, it was a straightforward acknowledgement that physical attraction and intimacy were integral to love and partnership. It shows a holistic view of love where emotional and physical bonds were intertwined and equally valued. Consider the role of fertility in ancient Egyptian culture. Life revolved around the fertile Nile, and the continuation of the family line was paramount. Therefore, the act of procreation, and by extension, the sexual act, was seen as sacred and vital. Deities associated with fertility like Min, the god of fertility and virility, were worshipped openly. Amulets and symbols depicting phallic imagery were not uncommon, serving as representations of life force and regeneration. This reverence for fertility meant that sexuality, as the means to achieve it, was not something to be hidden or ashamed of, but rather celebrated in its natural context. This common historical fact about the emphasis on fertility shaped their entire worldview, including their attitudes toward sex. Beyond procreation, the Egyptians also recognized sex as a source of pleasure and companionship. Marriage was not solely a pragmatic union for producing heirs. It was also a partnership where intimacy played a significant role in bonding the couple. The concept of mutual satisfaction within marriage, while not explicitly detailed in every text, can be inferred from the overall celebratory tone towards human connection and desire. Imagine the simple joy of sharing a quiet evening with your spouse, the warmth of their presence, and the comfort of physical intimacy as a natural conclusion to a shared day. There was also a clear understanding of sexual health and contraception, albeit with methods that might seem peculiar today. We've already chuckled over the idea of crocodile dung, but other methods included concoctions made from honey and natron, or even acacia leaves, which are now known to have spermicidal properties. While their scientific understanding was limited, the desire to control family size and ensure well-being was evident. This demonstrates a practical approach to sexuality, recognizing its various functions beyond just procreation and actively seeking methods for responsible family planning. This obscure historical fact about their contraceptive methods truly underscores their practical ingenuity, a humorous thought. Imagine an ancient Egyptian couple, perhaps a little too eager, using some rather pungent perfumes to enhance their allure, leading to a comedic misstep in their romantic overtures. Or perhaps a slightly clumsy attempt at an intimate moment, reminding us that even in ancient times, human passion wasn't always perfectly graceful. These small, relatable moments of human awkwardness would have undoubtedly been a part of their intimate lives, just as they are in ours. While the general attitude was open, there were still social boundaries. Incestuous relationships were typically confined to the royal family, who practiced it to maintain a pure divine lineage. For commoners, it was largely taboo. Prostitution existed as it does in most societies throughout history, but it wasn't openly glorified. And as noted, female adultery carried more severe social consequences than male adultery, reflecting prevailing patriarchal norms, even within a relatively progressive society. So it wasn't a free-for-all. There were structures and expectations. Historians still debate the precise social implications of these different sexual behaviors across various social strata, but the overarching cultural comfort with sexuality is a notable characteristic. Ultimately, the ancient Egyptian approach to sexuality was deeply integrated into their daily lives, their religious beliefs, and their understanding of the natural world. It wasn't something to be hidden or whispered about, but a vital force, a source of joy, and a means of continuation. For you, an ancient Egyptian living in this society meant a fundamental acceptance of the human body and its desires, fostering an environment where physical intimacy was a natural and celebrated part of forming deep, lasting connections. It was a refreshing perspective, far removed from the more restrictive views that would emerge in later eras, offering a fascinating glimpse into a culture that truly embraced life in all its forms. Imagine yourself not as a pharaoh or a high priestess, but as a humble baker kneading dough before dawn, a potter shaping clay by the river, or a weaver patiently working at her loom. For the vast majority of ancient Egyptians, life was a cycle of hard work, dictated by the floods of the Nile and the demands of agriculture or craft. Yet even within this demanding existence, the fundamental human need for companionship and love remained paramount. Their dating and relationship experiences, while perhaps less documented in grand tombs, were just as rich and meaningful as those of their elite counterparts. For you, a common Egyptian, the search for a partner was often more practical and localized. Your social circle would primarily consist of your family, neighbors, and fellow workers in your village or craft quarter. You'd likely meet your future spouse through these everyday interactions, perhaps at the village, well in the marketplace, or during communal festivals. There were no grand balls or sophisticated salons. Your world was your immediate community, fostering connections based on shared experiences and mutual understanding. This reliance on the immediate community for finding a spouse is a common historical fact for non-elite populations across many ancient civilizations. Marriage for commoners was still largely about establishing a stable household and continuing the family line. It was a partnership based on shared labor and mutual support. A farmer would seek a wife who could manage the household, raise children, and perhaps assist with small-scale agricultural tasks. A craftsman would look for a partner who could help with the business, manage finances, and create a nurturing home environment. These were practical unions designed for survival and prosperity within their specific economic context. Imagine the discussions between families focusing on a potential spouse's diligence, their skills, and their reputation for being a good provider or a capable homemaker. While romantic love might not have been the initial driving force, it certainly developed within these unions. The daily grind, the shared joys of a good harvest, the anxieties of a poor one, the laughter of children, and the quiet comfort of companionship would forge deep bonds. Love grew out of shared experiences, mutual respect, and the unwavering support provided to each other through life's trials. Think of the simple pleasure of an evening meal shared after a long day, the silent understanding between partners who knew each other's struggles and dreams. This gradual deepening of affection is a testament to the enduring power of human connection, even in the most mundane of circumstances. Children were perhaps even more so for commoners, seen as an absolute necessity. They were not only a source of joy, but also future labor and old age support. High infant mortality rates meant that producing many children was crucial for ensuring the survival of the family lineage. For you, a common Egyptian, having many hands to help in the fields or in your workshop meant the difference between survival and hardship. The raising of children was a communal effort, with extended family members often playing a significant role, reinforcing the strong family ties that characterized Egyptian society. The legal protections for women, including the ability to own property, initiate divorce, and manage their own affairs, extended to common women as well. While perhaps not as wealthy as their elite counterparts, a common woman still had legal standing within her marriage and in the event of its dissolution. This meant she wasn't entirely vulnerable or dependent on her husband's will, offering a degree of autonomy that was quite remarkable for the ancient world. It's an obscure historical fact that sheds light on the surprisingly equitable legal framework that permeated different social strata in ancient Egypt. Historians still debate the practical accessibility of these legal rights for the very poorest segments of society, but the intent of the law was clear. Consider a small humorous scene from everyday life. A young man trying to impress a woman at the village well attempts a clumsy joke, splashing water on himself instead of being charming. Or a woman trying to show off her weaving skills accidentally tangles a thread so badly it creates a comical mess. These small, endearing moments of human imperfection would have been part of their courtship, adding a touch of realism to the sometimes idealized narratives of ancient life. Even without grand palaces or elaborate rituals, common Egyptians found ways to celebrate love and companionship. Simple feasts, local festivals, and community gatherings provided opportunities for joy and connection. Music, dancing, and storytelling would have been integral to these events, allowing people to relax, socialize, and express their feelings. Imagine the sound of a simple flute accompanying joyful dancing under the moonlight after a successful harvest, or the shared laughter over a good story told by an elder. These were the moments where everyday love blossomed away from the grand narratives of pharaohs and gods. The concept of a dating life as a series of casual encounters before marriage was largely non-existent for commoners, just as it was for the elite. Life was too precarious and the need for a stable partnership too immediate. Courtship was often a more direct path towards marriage, facilitated by family and community approval. However, this doesn't mean that infatuation, crushes, or unrequited love didn't exist. The human heart, regardless of social status, experiences the full spectrum of emotions. There would have been secret glances, whispered hopes, and perhaps even the heartbreak of an unfulfilled desire, all playing out within the rhythm of their daily lives. Ultimately, the lives of ordinary Egyptians reveal that the essence of human relationships is universal. Despite the demanding conditions, the limited resources, and the clear social structures, they found love-formed families and built lives together. Their relationships were founded on practicality, mutual respect, and the quiet devotion that grows from shared experiences and unwavering support. For you, living as a common Egyptian love was not a grand epic, but a persistent, comforting presence woven into the very fabric of your daily existence, providing strength, warmth, and meaning amidst the challenges of the timeless land of the Nile. Imagine yourself now not as an ancient Egyptian, but as your modern self reflecting on the journey you've just taken. What surprising lessons or comforting echoes can you draw from the love stories of a civilization so far removed in time? Perhaps the most striking realization is that while the mechanics of dating have undergone a seismic shift, the fundamental human desires that drive it remain gloriously, stubbornly constant. You still yearn for connection, for understanding, for a partner to share your life's journey. Consider the ancient Egyptians' pragmatic approach to marriage. While modern romance often prioritizes an immediate, passionate spark, they often started with a foundation of practicality, family alignment, and mutual benefit. Yet within those arrangements, deep and enduring love blossomed. This isn't to say we should all rush into arranged marriages, but it offers a gentle reminder that love can grow and evolve, even from unexpected beginnings. Perhaps it encourages us to look beyond the immediate spark and consider the deeper qualities that make a relationship sustainable: kindness, reliability, shared values, and mutual respect. The surprisingly strong legal rights of women in ancient Egyptian relationships also offer a fascinating parallel. Their ability to own property, initiate divorce, and protect their financial interests within marriage was remarkably progressive. This historical fact should make you pause and consider the foundational importance of equity and fairness in any partnership, regardless of the era. A relationship built on mutual respect and equal standing, where both parties feel secure and valued, is one that has a far greater chance of flourishing. It's a testament to their foresight that they embedded such protections into their legal framework, even when many other ancient societies did not. Then there's the delightful frankness about sexuality and sensuality. The ancient Egyptians didn't shy away from the physical aspects of love. They celebrated it as a natural and joyful part of human experience. This open-mindedness, devoid of much of the shame and prudishness that would mark later eras, reminds us of the importance of embracing intimacy as a healthy and vital component of a loving relationship. It's a refreshing perspective that contrasts sharply with some modern anxieties and taboos surrounding the human body and desire. Think about the longevity and resilience of their relationships. Despite challenges like high mortality rates, limited resources, and the often harsh realities of daily life families endured, love was a force that bound them together, providing solace, strength, and continuity. This enduring quality of ancient Egyptian love, whether expressed through grand monuments or whispered poems, speaks to the power of human connection to withstand the tests of time and adversity. It's a quiet reassurance that even when life feels overwhelming, the bonds of love can be a steadfast anchor. And what about the humorous moments? The clumsy jokes, the awkward flirtations, the questionable beauty remedies? These small, relatable imperfections underscore the timelessness of human experience. We still stumble, we still blush, and we still sometimes make amusing missteps in the delicate dance of courtship. These ancient echoes remind us that despite the vast technological and cultural divides, the human heart in all its vulnerability and charm remains fundamentally the same. The beauty of their love poetry, too, offers a profound lesson. In a world without social media or instant messaging, they crafted lyrical verses to express the deepest yearnings of their hearts. This emphasis on eloquent expression, on finding the perfect words to convey affection, encourages us to slow down to be more intentional with our words and to appreciate the power of heartfelt communication in our own relationships. Imagine taking the time to truly craft a meaningful message rather than a quick text. It's a practice that might just bring a touch of ancient romance into your modern life. As you reflect on this journey through ancient Egyptian love, you might find a renewed appreciation for your own relationships, for the modern conveniences that make connecting easier, but also for the enduring human qualities that truly make love meaningful. The ancient Egyptians, despite their differences, shared our deepest hopes and fears, our joys and sorrows, especially when it came to the bewildering, beautiful, and utterly essential pursuit of love. Now, as the last remnants of sunlight fade from the ancient pyramids in your mind's eye, and the gentle lapping of the Nile becomes a distant memory, allow the tranquil hum of the night to envelop you. Let the timeless echoes of ancient love stories of shared lives and enduring bonds settle softly within your thoughts. The whispers of a pharaoh's affection, the tender verses of a humble potter, all melt into the stillness, guiding you towards a restful slumber.